Welcome to our first edition of Stu and Coco, which is our podcast. I'd like to introduce Jeremy Brim, non-executive business consultant and MD of Growth Ignition. Welcome, Jeremy.
Hello, Tony. Thank you for having me, mate.
That is my pleasure. Jeremy, should we kick off with a little bit more about you, Growth Ignition, and what you're doing at the moment?
Yes, certainly. Thank you. So I've got 20 years of experience in leading bid functions, working on big bids and sales functions. And so I was very lucky. I grew up, first of all, working at a company called Mouchel, the big outsourcing business. And I was the youngest in amongst a bunch of very bright people who let me tag along. And so predominantly led by a guy called Graham Keane, who was a real sort of leading light in going and winning lots of big deals. And he went off, left Mouchel to become head of public sector at EC Harris at the time. And so a number of us followed Graham to EC Harris, and so and through to Arcadis onwards from there. And so I was really lucky to be able to accelerate my career quite early on by following those guys and learning from them as we went. So I was the youngest associate in the history of EC Harris, other than Richard Clare, the chairman, which he used to wind me up about all the time.
And he was a proper QS.
Yeah, he had a real job. Yeah, I'm just a salesman. So although he was a very, very smart man.
I always remember his cufflinks. He was a very dapper gent, or he's a dapper gent.
Yes. Well, I remember there was an interview article with him in Building Magazine or something many years ago now. And they'd interviewed a number of other sort of leading lights in the consultancy world. And one of the questions was, how many times a month do you go out for dinner? And he said 29. Sort of 2 or 3, and I was like, okay, that's the measure of the man. So yeah, very good. So yeah, had a great career with EC Harris and into Arcadis, and then the bastard sold the firm just before I was due to make partner. Absolutely the right deal for them, right thing to do. So I stuck around for a year, helped with the integration, but realised that a lot of the guys, senior dudes that I like to work with on their big global deals. So I ran their pursuit function for their biggest stuff in the world, won the Qatar World Cup stadia, all of Microsoft's estate around the world.
Wow.
All sorts of stuff, leading a team of bid managers, writers, pursuit experts. But realised all the guys that I like to work with were going to either retire out because they'd got their earn out, or were going to go abroad to places I didn't fancy going. So I had a couple of years out in the fairly murky world of debt recovery and transaction stuff. 6 months with one business, merging it together with, which was the biggest business in that market, merging it together with its second biggest competitor that it bought. And then I got headhunted to go and be on the board of one of their smaller, more interesting companies called JBW, owned by a guy called Jamie Waller, whose middle name must be Barry. And when I joined, he'd failed to sell the firm for about 10 million. And over 2 years, between me and chairman, Mark Johnston, we helped Jamie sell it for 26 and the technology platform for another 9.
Fantastic.
By winning some big deals, sorting the pipeline out, writing a great IM, and a bit.
What sort of multiples?
I think he'd failed to sell it on 4 times, and we sold it for many more than that. Must have been like 12 times over or something.
Wow.
Like that. So yeah, Jamie has a yacht and a helicopter now, I think. Has done all right for himself. And so coming towards the end of that, and I guess the relevant bit for this really was there's a guy called Matt Goff at Mace who led the bid team.
He's a bit of a visionary chap.
Just a bit, yeah. Likes to stand in front of a big picture of himself, with not wearing a tie, but with the top button still done up. No, he's super bright and great to work with. So he was looking for a number 2 to basically do him out of a job in running that bid team. So I joined with a plan to push him out of the job in 18 months, say, and it happened in 4, I think. And he got group head of bids job and then the director of innovation one. And so I ended up running the bid function of Mace, the sexiest builder in the world, as I like to say, which used to piss tears off, but it's I'll fight anyone who thinks differently. When I had a great team of wonderful people who went and helped the business win Tottenham Stadium and all the stuff you see in the press for good or for bad. But I've got a nice quote from the COO saying, Gareth Lewis, saying it was their most successful period. But in March 2018, my dad, who had bought into a business at the age of 50 and sold out at 60 and now drives around in a Morgan looking smug, he took me to one side at what I call the inheritance protection lunch, where my siblings go round my parents' house and, it's like the Hunger Games for Brims. No, it's not. They're lovely, really.
Eyeing up trinkets.
Yes, yeah.
Putting tags on things, yeah.
I'm sure you bought Mum the biggest Mother's Day card.
Yeah.
Dad took me to one side and less than politely explained I was killing myself making the board of Mace rich, and although I was very good at it, I should perhaps rethink my life choices, and set me a challenge. So we have a £1 bet that we agreed on that day, and there's a notepad at my parents' house that's got all the rules written on it. We sat there and crafted it there and then. So I wasn't allowed any money. I can't do anything that's on the critical path or a risk for any businesses. But I had to do something that makes a difference. And then personally, I have to go to the gym a couple of times a week. I have to spend more time with my wife. I'm not allowed to work in London full time, stuff like that. So I was kind of rocked, really. I thought my dad was proud of me, doing something. But I think he was. But it was a damn good challenge. So I took a few months to think about what I was going to do. And so came up with a business that's got a consultancy stream that had a technology platform called the Bid Toolkit, and then has a training stream that's aligned to that. Consultancy wise, I'm a non-exec director of 5 SMEs, all high growth, high margin businesses with bright and interesting owners or partners that I'm helping shape or grow. Although not all of it's growth related, we've done some disaster recovery stuff, we've done marketing, rebranding, people stuff, all sorts of things. So I love that. Although they're all only half a day a month, that's really good fun. But that won't make me hit the numbers that I've agreed with my old man. I've just about to complete 18 months working a couple of days a week for Morgan Sindall, where I've taken one of their business units and worked with their senior team to sort out its growth strategy and then go and deliver on that. And we've
is this the Morgan Sindall regional teams, or is it Morgan Sindall London?
Yeah, so I was just working with their office in Welwyn Garden City, so it covers the northern home counties, Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire, Buckinghamshire, and the northern London boroughs. They haven't turned over what they should do from that office in recent years. So they've brought in a new leadership team with Dave Rousell joined from Waits as the area director, who's a sort of thrusting new person to that role and is doing a great job. And between us and his senior team, the business unit will be 50% bigger this year, 100% secured, and 50% again bigger next year, 100% secured.
Wow.
And not only that, rather than bottom feeding, bidding and winning.
This is all nice two-stage D&B frameworks, isn't it?
All two-stage, single stage. And we took a strategy to find them clients that were good to work with, that had pipelines of work. So we've secured some hero jobs, as we called it, that were quite big for them, relatively speaking, at the sort of 30, 40 million.
Lovely.
And then we've secured projects with clients who've got long-term programs of lots of schools or lots of social infrastructure. So it's got a decent pipeline off to the future. So I've kind of completed the task, really. So I'm on the hunt now for my next retained clients. I like to have a couple of days a week of consulting to keep me alive to things and to have a bit of repetition, because I don't want to be all over the place all the time.
Also a bit of ownership. I guess it takes a bit of time to get under the skin of a business and then contribute, and actually maybe to get to the stage where you've got the teeth to affect a bit of change.
Yes, well, I don't I'm not a management consultant who just comes in and uses your watch to tell you the time and then buggers off. I like to deliver the outcomes. And so that Morgan Stanley example is a good one where we've really done that. And then, in the other space so we have a online platform called the Bid Toolkit that's a integrated bid processing guide with training and tools to download baked into it. And there's a public version that's pay per play, which has decent readership all around the world. Oddly, quite a lot in Louisiana and Texas, and I have no idea why. But in effect, that the training content that's baked into it's accredited by the Association of Proposal Management Professionals, so you can watch that content and then go and take their exams. It's for bidding people. But
when did you launch that, Jeremy? When did you launch the Bid Toolkit?
So it actually launched before I left Mace, because I'd gifted it to my wife's marketing agency to build out and launch. So they actually built it out and tested it. So version 1 went out in March 2018. Shortly after that conversation with my dad, and then I picked up the leadership with it when I started the business in October.
And have you got any empirics yet on businesses that have used the Bid Toolkit and seen some wins?
Yeah, well, certainly we can't track so easily the people who just pay per play. But we do sell it as an enterprise platform for corporates. So we've got a number of clients who have got it baked into their intranet. They pay a monthly subscription fee, and all the paywalls are removed. And we also deploy them in their brand and can tweak it to their bid process as well. And so where we've got clients, particularly, you will see actually by the time this goes out, sort of towards the end of April, certainly a new campaign will come out of the business on what we've called 55, 25, 20. So there was an old rule of thumb that 70, 20, 10 in the 80s in the training world, where sort of defines that people pick up 10% of their learning through structured learning, going on courses, etc. 20% through social learning through friends, mentoring, etc. And then 70% through on the job, because humans learn by making mistakes, experimenting. That's what makes it stick in your brain. So most organisations in the bid capability development space just do structured learning. They
do the top 10%
courses, which of course doesn't.
Or the first 10%.
Yeah, first 10%. So it doesn't have the big outcomes for employers that perhaps they would like. And of course you also have, people lose the notes or the book, and you have 15% staff turnover, so people leave, and so you've lost that. And so our proposition is that yes, we'll do the structured learning to create a hockey stick of initial momentum in people understanding how to go and win business well and effectively. But then so that's the sort of the 10, as it were. Well, now in the modern days, probably 20% of learning is taken on like that and sticks. The next 25% us providing modules as part of leadership development programs, graduate schemes, apprenticeship schemes, coaching senior people and intervening in some of the pre-bid work on bids that companies do. And then they have an enterprise bid toolkit with that learning content, micro learning, as they need it. And the key bit is it's all the same content, so that you're baking that approach to winning work, that best practice, into the DNA of the business. With, particularly importantly, with the sponsorship of someone probably board level.
So it goes from being an initial bolt-on to running through the business in terms of all of its functions.
And so with our clients, where we've deployed that fully, we're seeing a 20% increase in their win rate.
Wow.
So we fully expect and would be disappointed if we didn't deliver 100 times the value of what is spent on us in margin.
Wow.
And so
that's the big headline figures: 20% increase in win rate if they don't just buy it off the shelf, but they integrate and bake it into their entire process. And on top of that, you reckon 100 times value generated out of your fee, or 100 times relative, within what, 12 months, 24 months?
Probably 6.
Wow.
On average.
Wow.
At least, really. I mean, clearly in construction businesses, the numbers are multiplied. So although you're talking about a smaller percentage margin, you're talking on millions of pounds of construction, whereas in businesses, it's just their fee. And so, that's really quite a profound program. So we've got a number of clients. Unfortunately, there's lots of NDAs around this because it kind of becomes IP. We've only picked one client per market where we've deployed it.
We'll have a conflict otherwise.
That will spread. And we've now got partnership agreements with different consultancies where they'll sell that bid toolkit proposition
as part of their consulting offering.
Yeah,
that's interesting. And how have you found the influence COVID-19 in terms of having to incorporate that into PQQ process, into sort of being proactive as part of a pitch for 100 days from now?
So it's early days from the UK's perspective. I'm guessing most of the listeners, viewers of this would be UK centric. I've been doing a lot of work with partners. In fact, Graham Keane, who I grew up working for, is one of the MDs. He's the regional MD of a company called Artemis. He's based in Hong Kong. He for the last few years, ran all of Asia in Hong Kong with Matt Benyon. And so I've been spending a bit of time talking to Graham about what they've been finding in Asia, because clearly they're 2 months ahead of us.
Yeah.
And that's where the 100-day plan stuff we're going to talk about has come from. It's understanding what Graham and his mates have been doing with their clients out there and what they're finding in terms of the curve of when people are coming back to work and when deals are starting to move, and what we'll find here. But even though they're 2 months ahead of us, they're only just beginning to see some green shoots. The reality is that this is going to go on for some time. Certainly in terms of new business, I think in construction terms, we'll see construction sites and supply chains starting to come back. Clearly London's a different market, and certainly the big conurbations are different markets compared to regional contractors building a school in a field.
Yeah.
If you're the Maces, Lennoxes, etc., on mega projects in London, that's a
different kettle of fish.
Difficult proposition in terms of getting people into site, out of site, all of that kind of stuff. So I would expect the market will start to come back and rev at a more usual rate during June. I think the headlines are going to be grabbed by some fairly horrific death toll numbers throughout as a consequence of what's happened in previous weeks. And then plateau through May, and then in June, I think we'll start to, obviously we'll have more people, and hopefully the antibody testing comes, so we'll have more people able to go back to work and sites to begin to effectively. In a work winning zone though, I think confidence, clearly there's perception and reality, and confidence plays a part. We've seen a number of major frameworks already kicked down the road for a year. P2020 for starters in the health market. In terms of actual construction bidding, we're going to have to see. We're going to exit into some of my contacts are using the phrase depression rather than recession.
Wow.
1920 stuff, something far beyond 2008, because no one's ever seen something on this scale and impact before. And so what that means for confidence of investors in the private sector, we'll have to see. I'm hearing noises that, ironically, Chinese investors are beginning to push hard in London to invest because they see it as a bearish opportunity.
Yeah.
So of course they're back at work, and so apparently the residential market in London you may well see some Chinese investment. UK public sector wise, lots of people are trying to second guess where their business plan's going to go, and they think the government's going to spend in health. I'm not so sure. I think it's quite short term that the government's going to be in more debt than it's been in a very long time.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head for a couple of key themes for me. Certainly in terms of public sector debt, it's going to spiral. And it's whether or not those spending commitments, certainly in terms of health and infrastructure that were made pre-March, can actually now be carried through. Can we afford it? And then with regards to the private sector, I've had some really positive feedback from two major developers over the last couple of weeks that they're very bullish about acquisitions. They're very bullish about getting existing schemes through planning and procuring, because again they see it as a good window of opportunity to procure Q3, Q4 or Q4, Q1 next year. And they're also, those two major developers are pretty bullish in terms of pent up demand. But I do. My personal view is I hope that that liquidity doesn't freeze up, because I think as long as we've got low rates, as long as the world is liquid, as long as credit continues to flow, I think we'll be all right. But I think the problem you'll find, like we did in 2008, is if that all ceases. And one of the things I'm finding is I'm talking to contractors around London. And it's all very well and good shutting down for a month, but that's a month's worth of cash not running through your books whilst trying to pay X amount of your staff. And first of all, that wipes out your entire profit for the year at best. But in terms of cash flow, it's potentially critical,
Yeah, and then of course there's subbies where cash flow is even more critical. And so, I've been advising some of my non-exec clients are subbies, and helpfully they're pretty cash rich and have been able to mothball the business with pretty low overhead. So I've been advising them to obviously run credit checks on their clients, but also to run credit checks on some of their competition to see where the opportunities are going to pop up. So we can go on to talking about the 100-day plan stuff, I guess, but the reality is the competitive landscape is going to be quite different in 100 days' time. There'll be some competitors that won't be there.
So Jeremy, let's talk about this. Let's talk about your 100-day plan. To introduce it for us.
So in response to COVID-19, I've put out on LinkedIn primarily, but we've built a page on our site too now, a bunch of free-to-air content. And so the concept is, hopefully we've just got 100 days before deals and bids start to come around again. Might be a bit longer, but let's assume 1st of July was a good target date. So when we started the campaign, that was 100 days away. And what we've released is a what are called a TMAP, which management consultants would recognise, a plan across the 3 months of April, May and June, and dissected by different streams of activity. So what you should be doing in terms of marketing, what you should be doing in terms of business development, what you should be doing in terms of capture and pursuit of key pursuits, and what your bid team should be doing.
Yeah.
And so fundamentally, the key point is a lot of business leaders have furloughed or certainly just assumed that their bid functions are going to be sitting on their hands for the next 3 months. I think that's an error to do that fully, because actually what they should be doing is supporting the readiness for the bids that will come around. So the concept of the plan is, marketing wise, you should get yourself ready to start putting out helpful content for clients, because the whole concept is you need to stay close to your clients, be helpful, understand where the market's going to be and where you need to fish, and then prepare yourself in readiness for that street fight, because it's going to be a street fight, because we're going to be in a recession or a depression. And so marketing wise, I think you should land 3 thought leadership pieces on the run up to that 1st of July that are helpful to clients.
Yeah.
And so it might be social value is going to be a big thing. The world of social value is going to be completely different. There's going to be shed loads of people unemployed that weren't unemployed before, from the aviation industry at different places. What are you going to do about that? So define what those look like. And this all runs towards shaping what your end game looks like. So during the month of April, you need to plan and figure out what the world's going to look like in your markets on the 1st of July, and then undertake a series of activities to best position you to win that fight when you get to the 1st of July.
Yeah.
Marketing wise, bit of thought leadership and campaigns around that. Business development wise, clearly you need to review your pipeline, what is still going to exist, which clients are going to survive, where's the funding going to be, and then clearly prioritizing calls, business teams calls, all of that kind of stuff aligned with where your pipeline is going to be. So you're building nice momentum towards it. Capture-wise, reassessing any capture plans, although in construction I would understand. I think there's one contractor that actually deploy capture to any extent. Contractors aren't very good at this, and it's something they should think about, because you might have seen.
And I'm guessing that's Mace?
It's not.
Oh.
They stopped doing it when I left, from what I understand.
Ah.
They do it in consultancy, major programs and consultancy, but not so much in construction, which might explain the win rate. So you're not going to share it with us? No, I'm not. So fundamentally, around 60% of procurement decisions are made before the ITT is ever written, let alone sent out. Positioning yourself, clients tend to know who they want to work with, because it's all about trust. They're going to trust you with their personal scorecard and their construction project for the next number of years. And so getting your people in front of their people, building relationships, understanding how you can generate more value for that client than your competition in advance of the ITT, and of course with an objective to negotiate the job. When I used to train all the partners and associates in capture and bidding at EC Harris, I used to explain to them, if they saw me with my bid manager hat on, they'd failed as a salesperson. And everyone's a salesperson, by the way, not just BD people.
Yeah.
And so as a partner and an associate, if you need my help as a bid professional, I'm here to save your ass. But fundamentally, the business is now in competition. We've got only a percentage chance of winning it that isn't 100%. So
yes, understood.
Capture's all about positioning to win things way before it ever goes to a tender, because contractors always seem to be obsessed with waiting until an ITT comes out, and it's mad. Let's try and win it before.
Well, it's too late by then, isn't it? Because as soon as the ITT comes out, you've got conflict if you try and engage directly.
There's theory, but it's hard work, whereas you could have done it ages before. So winning at a better margin, because fundamentally, whether you're building an asset or whether you're providing a service, whatever you're doing, the client's looking for a desired business outcome. And if you can create a bigger outcome for them than your competition with more value, you can take a slice of that value, which should be bigger, should be more profitable if you do it together with better synergy. But anyway, I'll just get that off my chest. It's the thing that binds. So the capture, and then clearly your bid team shouldn't just be fanning around your bid library. I've seen lots of posts about bid managers, tidying up the bid library and case studies and things. They should be generating specific content in readiness for the bids that you're going to face in your pipeline. Just anything, clearly, obviously. They should obviously be preparing for running bids virtually, which will be alien to most people. How do you run meetings using Microsoft Teams? Is a different art to just having a bunch of flip charts in a meeting room.
Yeah, sitting around the table.
Yeah, you've got to do some preparation, have a starter for 10, because it's quite difficult to run a Teams call with a blank sheet of paper or virtual paper. So, good preparation, making sure people have read content before they turn up, all of that sort of stuff as a bid manager is quite important. So there's a free plan that people can download and use. There's a article on LinkedIn that goes with that to explain why, and there's a free webinar where I talk through that in some detail. So that was the first bit of the campaign, which was last week. This week we're putting it out there that people can get in touch with me from anywhere around the world and spend an hour with me on Teams talking through that plan specifically for their business and what they should do. And then next week, the campaign will start where they can buy some of my time to help them into the next level of detail, execute some of that. So help them with capture plans for key pursuits that they have to win now when the gates open.
Fantastic. So in terms of four or five key headers, what's important for businesses facing the next 100 days is certainly to appreciate that that's the ideal time frame, and that you are on hand to assist businesses with that, with a range of tools. But certainly businesses need to be planning now to come out July forwards.
Yeah, I mean, it's particularly for construction firms that are caught in this challenge of government not mandating the closure of construction sites, but at the other end, subbies not wanting to turn up and materials being running short and all of that. So I understand that construction businesses, I really feel for leaders in construction businesses at the moment, because it's an incredibly difficult position to be in, and clearly they're going to be bleeding cash all over the place. So, you know, obviously alongside all the usual business things that you do around protecting cash, protecting your people, their safety, etc., somebody needs to be thinking about safeguarding the future of the business, and not just sort of sitting on your hands waiting for it to happen. You're going to be in a street fight with a bunch of competitors that will look and feel different to what they did when you last saw them before this started. And also, quite importantly, we haven't talked about clients, in that clients' wants and needs are going to be, and stresses are going to be different.
Yeah.
They're probably going to come after a different profile of social value for starters. They're probably going to change the way commercially that they look to procure things. We may see a resurgence of some single stage, but then also there'll be clients with deadlines to open assets, like schools, for instance, at a particular point in time. You know,
They will need to engage fast.
Yes.
We'll have to do it on a two-stage basis.
Yeah, and quickly. So, you know, can you talk to clients about getting on board at stage 0, stage 1, which should by now have been a stage 2 or stage 3, and accelerate that early program?
Yeah.
It's
because you're right, because now is the time to be getting designs through planning, and post stage 2 into the design development stage is where you can get to engaging a contractor early on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, the EU regs have been changed. The government have taken the opportunity to enable more direct awards and slightly loosening the grip on procurement, because they recognise clearly it was for supplies, COVID-related stuff, PPE, etc. But they recognise that clients in the public sector certainly are going to need to get things back on track. But you can use frameworks for that sort of thing.
So if we were surmising all of this, sort of a final note from Jeremy Brim, in order to survive today, to be able to thrive tomorrow, give us kind of your key must-dos.
So review your pipeline to understand of what's left of it, what you need to address. You know, where is the money going to be? Where are the opportunities going to be? And then focus your efforts on influencing those clients, staying close to them, being helpful. So when the opportunity does come around, you're ready to win that street fight.
And I think you're right. A street fight it will be, unfortunately. All right. Well, look, Jeremy Brim, thank you very much for your input today and your time. And we wish you the best over the next 3-6 months, certainly 100 days.
Thank you, chap. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Jeremy.